I first wanted to start by saying a little bit about how we met and your and things you've done. Because how we've met has been literally, I think, 100% through Facebook, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly how we came.
Years ago. It's years. Yeah. It's been years now.
I don't know if Matt Tull was if he was the glue, to sort of put us together. I don't know, or if I came to him through you. I just know that it's you two guys. You guys are like peas and carrots, right?
Yeah. Well, we're friends. We're actual friends in real life.
Yeah, in real life. Yeah.
And our arguing is like a fake.
It's some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah.
On the internet.
Right.
I think that it's hilarious. All the stuff between you and him is priceless. So.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure Matt actually turned me on to your post because he was like, you need to follow this guy. And eventually you friended me, and I was like, and I've loved your post ever since. And I would say to you, if I can compliment you without being awkward about it, I want to say you're probably the most positive and enthusiastic force in my life that I've ever interacted with for movie reviewing, ever. Like, I'm not trying to be awkward.
It's very sweet of you. Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's one of those things. I don't get paid to, none of us are paid to do all this movie stuff on Facebook. And my whole feeling has always been like, with the Facebook stuff has just been, I don't really necessarily want to spend too much of my time concentrating on like the shit that I see. I would rather promote a film that either no one's heard of or discuss a movie that maybe, is like a 50-50 item on like Rotten Tomatoes for whatever that's worth. And then maybe turn some people onto it rather than, talk about like, every third day, like some movie I saw that was garbage. And like, like I do see movies I don't like everybody loves to give me shit. Like, you like everything. No, it's like,
we've disagreed on stuff before.
Yeah.
Right?
I just post about things that I enjoy.
Right.
If somebody wants to pay me to write 15 reviews a week, then people will get negativity out the ass. It's just like when time is limited and there's enough garbage going on in your day, I just don't see the need to sort of like harp on things. And then when I do post a negative review, people freak out and they're like, what happened to Nick? The whole thing. And I think it's funny. And every once in a while I'll do it just to fuck with people. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Oh, absolutely, man. Okay. Go fucking head.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll just do it just to screw with people. But at the end of the day, I do want to promote films that I enjoy. I think that there's great, conversations to be had about so many, awesome movies. And you really, bring up honestly, whether it be people who are commenting on my stuff or just going to other people's pages on, Facebook gets a lot of, bad, vibes from folks, and I get it. But in terms of like movie fans getting a chance to talk to each other, I have found it just to be so invaluable and fun and a great respite from, all of the bullshit that we all have to endure every day, all day. It's like my one sanctuary. So it's like, why do I want to sit and shit in my own sanctuary?
No, I was going to say, like, I view your, especially your tonight's presentation, I believe it's, whenever you post about what you're watching tonight with the poster,
yeah.
I always view the threads underneath those posters as sort of a safe space for like actual, because like I disagree with people in there sometimes and stuff, but I find that unlike other message boards, Twitter threads, even Facebook posts, your posts are always this like kind of everyone, even when they vehemently disagree, there's sort of a politeness about it. And like, it's just about movies, and you bring that energy, and I really appreciate it. I have for years. So I really am happy I get to tell you that.
Cool.
It's really been a nice thing in my life on a daily basis. So I'm sure it is for a lot of people.
That's very nice.
Yeah. And you always are talking about movies that no one's talking about, which I appreciate. You like, you'll bring up some like obscure comedy from like the early 90s or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah. Okay. Awesome. Something I actually like know. You're not always talking just new releases.
Well, that's
so
part of that's part of the fun, for for all the new releases that you can talk about. Mm-hmm. There's a million movies out there that people have either forgotten about or just, haven't thought about or haven't seen or, got a bum rap somewhere. And, now it's time to sort of reinvestigate.
No, I really appreciate that. And there is a question I wanted to ask you. Now, for anyone that doesn't know your posts, you have this this saying that you use constantly. And I don't know where I love it. I absolutely love it. You constantly say power behind everything. And I don't know where the origin of that is. So if you could tell me where that came from, if it came from anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. So all of that stuff, the power stuff, it originated from when, back in the day when I lived in LA, in like 2005, I went to a test screening of The Island. Michael Bay's The Island.
The Island, okay.
And I loved it. Thought it was awesome. And back in those days, it's like 16 years ago. Wow. Back in those days, I'd run home to my apartment and jump on, the email and hit up Harry Knowles at Ain't It Cool News, and I would send him reviews. And I was under there. I used to review movies for Ain't It Cool under like a couple different names.
Really? I didn't know this.
Yeah. There's probably a few still up there. Charlotte Blackwood.
Okay.
Which of course was, from Top Gun. I used a couple other ones too. Action Man was another one.
You were I remember reading your reviews. I didn't even know it was you.
Yeah. Action Man and Charlotte Blackwood. So I'm trying to remember which one The Island was under. But somewhere in that review, I said something to the effect of like, this is pure Michael Bay power. And, at that point, I started to just throw it around on, I used to go, I've been reading like guys like, I don't know if you're familiar with like David Poland or Jeffrey Wells, those bloggers. Yeah. What?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So back in the day, David Poland had a blog called The Hot Blog. So I was a regular like commenter on that. And there was this other guy, I can only assume that he saw me use it. Perhaps maybe he, not that anybody can't say power after saying something just to express excitement. But like a little bit after I started to use it in like a public forum, I noticed another guy using it a lot. This guy, I don't know what his name is, Lex G. He's like a big Twitter guy, movie guy. I don't know if he still does it, but he was doing it for a while. I see it pop up all over the place. But yeah, it's just my idiotic, almost, just, obsessive compulsive need to, just basically, shower something with some quick praise. It's basically just a way of, generating a blanket statement of approval over something, whether it be, a filmmaker or an entire body of work or something, anything. It's not something I use actually in like normal speaking terms.
Right. Yeah.
I've had conversations with people, from Facebook on the phone or whatever. And they say, well, you didn't say the word power when we talked. I'm like, well, I don't say it in the conversation.
I was not expecting you to say power. I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
But it was definitely something that was born out of just reviewing movies for, on the internet and, just having some fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Facebook thing definitely took off with saying it. And, honestly, I find it very, and I take, again, not like, there could be 1,000 other people who, are doing this as well. And I've never met them and they've never seen my posts. I'm not trying to give off the vibe that, I created that word or whatever, but I can't help but notice that every time I sign into Facebook, I will scroll through my feed, and invariably there is someone who has made a post that says power in it, and that just makes me laugh, and I'm just like, oh, that's great. And,
that's your like rings of influence, man. Just
yes,
going
so
outward.
it is funny in that respect that the idiocy has traveled and people have embraced it, and because it's just a fun thing, and like what's really interesting about that thing too, not to like talk too much about it, but like I've noticed how it like pisses some people off.
Really?
Like, it's really strange. Yeah. Like
on your threads or in other spaces?
I've had it happen where like a couple people have like sent me private messages being like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, why do you keep saying that? Like, you sound stupid. And like my response to them is basically always the same thing. Like, go fuck yourself. Like, are you fucking crazy? Like people forget that like Facebook isn't like you can pretend that it's a democracy, and if you're a nice person, yeah, like it pretty much is, but it's basically a dictatorship. Like your page, like you don't need to listen to people. Like you can just bounce them if you want. If somebody's acting a fool, get rid of them. But I find it so interesting that like there are people that will actually take time out of their day to come by and drop a comment like, you're an idiot, and like stop saying power, and it's dumb, and like, well, yeah, of course it's dumb. Like, don't you know that I know that it's stupid? Like, I'm just having fun at this point. But it's interesting to note that like people have that much like time to like be a dick, but also to like get this visceral charge out of like seeing someone expressing excitement or happiness or approval over something. So it was weird. Like literally 4 or 5 mornings ago when I woke up and I was going through the Facebook messages from at night when I was sleeping, some asshole who was not a Facebook friend, but my posts are set to public, commented in one thread, like, I see this all the time, this power thing. What does it mean? Stop saying it. It doesn't mean anything. It's stupid. And like, I responded like, go fuck yourself. You're a fucking idiot, like blow it out your ass. And I let it sit there for a minute and I deleted the guy. But it's just so weird. Like, I just find it strange that something as innocuous as that could rub people the wrong way.
Yeah, it can make them actually angry.
Yeah, make them angry.
To personal message you too.
Yeah, and I've gotten like personal messages like, like stop saying it, like it's stupid. And like, well, like, dude, like unfollow me. Like don't fucking follow the posts. Like you're like, you know what I mean? But whatever. People are stupid, I mean, that's really just my comment on life right now. A lot of times it's just like people are really stupid.
Mean, Facebook did kind of destroy Western civilization, so it's going to happen every now. It's going to happen every now and then.
But I've gotten amazing comments, like, I've gotten wonderful, just like you, like wonderful people who have said, I won't say who, but like a really cool actor hit me up and like made me like, like feel all warm inside, like saying like, I was going to get rid of Facebook, but I can't because of your posts, and I just look forward to them so much. And like, for me, when I hear that, I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, I'm not getting paid to do this. It doesn't take a lot of time either. I'm not like I'm doing too much, you know what I mean? But the excitement that does come out of a lot of these conversations is really fun. And to say nothing of the industry professionals who, for whatever reason, like come by and drop comments and like, like very like interesting comments. And like, because I personally love hearing about what real filmmakers think about movies. I love hearing about what industry folks think, which is why I do so many interviews, or however many interviews I can in my, just for fun. Because I've always loved hearing about what other filmmakers think is cool.
Yeah, so. No, that's always the opinions I kind of seek out too.
and I'm shocked. Like I am very shocked that so many industry people, quite frankly, heroes and idols, have been so supportive and cool to talk privately and publicly, and it's just it's very neat. You wouldn't expect it, I should say.
I'm guessing you can't name any names there because they're private messages, right? But,
well, no, like...
Oh, you can? Okay.
I mean, like, you can go on my friends list. I keep my friends list public. You can look. There's any number of writers, directors, like the people I've interviewed for We Are Cult, even for Variety, have become, people who I've connected with on Facebook. I mean, like, I love when Philip Noyce, or Roger Donaldson, or any of these guys, Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski.
Wayne Kramer, is he?
Wayne Kramer. I haven't seen Wayne as much on Facebook. I know he's been busy, but Wayne and Mark Pellington and a half a dozen producers and tons of screenwriters. Daniel Waters, I love when Dan Waters gets in. He's the best. And there's all these great guys that are just like they know that you're coming at it from a fan's point of view.
Yeah.
And I think that helps. And, again, like when you grow up, I'm 41. I'm assuming that you're like around my age, maybe not
39.
Okay. Yep. So
I'm there. Yeah.
When you grow up watching these movies and you grow up steeped in 80s and 90s cinema, and then those people, talk to you about that shit.
It's a whole, it lights
really
you
cool.
up.
Yeah, definitely. So you can't help but just be excited about it. So,
yeah.
And I think we're going to talk about
I was going to say
talk about 90s action movies, which
the perfect segue. You kept saying all this great stuff, so I didn't want to interrupt.
No, totally.
You said the thing about the island. You said the island, and I was like, that's a perfect segue, kind of.
Yeah.
Because,
that's 2005.
It is, but I kind of consider that a turning point in his career.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? And I there's a lot of theories about that, but that's sort of veering into something we're not going to talk about. But I consider I made a list. I think I told you to too. I made a list of 3 filmmakers and then 3 films that stick out as important to me, even with hindsight, as important to me in 90s action. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about 90s action is not just because of your posts, because you've made a lot of posts about 90s action movies, and they're my favorite. I think I remember like Cliffhanger, and you've talked about just a vast array of them over the years. But 90s is never talked about when action is brought up. It's 80s, right? I mean, it's the one that has all the homages and all the jokes and all the look back. We think of Stallone and Arnold, and in the 80s specifically, it's like 90s action is never discussed as much. Maybe with Nick Cage, I think he's kind of the only one that brings people back to there often. Yeah. But it doesn't seem to have a voice like the 80s did,
Mm-hmm.
But it really shaped movies, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, especially where we are today.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, like I agree. I cheated a little bit too.
Go ahead. You can cheat.
Because I had like 3 filmmakers, but then I was like, well, wait a minute. If I talk about this one guy, I kind of have to talk about 2 other people that are
great.
They're all like, connected at the hip. And we can get into that like trio in a minute, but
absolutely.
But like when I think of 90s action, and I agree with you, the 80s had a specific aesthetic vibe.
And no hate towards the 80s. It's just
totally love.
Yeah, love it.
I mean, totally. We could do a podcast about that.
Same.
But like the 90s embraced, like for me, the 90s were a little bit of the 70s and they were a little bit of the 80s mixed together.
Yep.
And I think that you had narratives that were like a little bit more, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more complicated probably at times than like sort of the straightforward meat and potatoes 80s action movies.
You also had the end of the kind of the action Muscle Man that ended that like we went from Stallone, and then I think Stallone always says as soon as Michael Keaton put on that suit with fake muscles, then everything changed. Then the 90s happened. You know what I mean? And then we had the everyman action hero.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And like you still had like, like I would have to go back and look at all of the movies, of course, but like when you think about the end of the Muscle Man, like you had Schwarzenegger in the 90s. He did T2 in 91, and then he did True Lies in 94. And I'm trying to think about like right after True Lies probably came Eraser. And like, that was sort of segueing into like the 2000s. Like Eraser was caught like
in between the
end of one and then going into the next.
Eraser I kind of considered kind of the last big swing of Arnold's golden
pretty much
years, if that makes sense.
True Lies, I think, was that was the last like
that was the
slam.
peak. That
was the peak. Yeah, totally. And I love that. And it's one of my all-time favorite 90s action movies. And it was funny when I made my list of people, like I was like, wait a minute, what about Cameron? And it's like, because like, how do you ever like discount Cameron's contributions to the 90s? You know,
he's actually on my list. I'm just telling you right now,
because I didn't have him, so we'll talk about that in a second. But
it's hard. He hasn't made that many movies, but when he makes a movie, it's like
it's not as prolific, but every movie is important. And
like even if you don't like Avatar, saying it's not important is ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like yeah.
Correct. And listen, everybody can bitch and moan about Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 or whatever. And like I'm right there with you. But we all know that when the trailer comes out, we're gonna like
be there, man.
Everyone's gonna be like holy shit, James Cameron's a fucking nut. You know, like I'm gonna have to go see this now. So everybody can bitch.
You don't doubt James Cameron.
No, no.
You just don't.
I mean, here's the thing.
Yeah.
You make the biggest movie ever, and then the next movie you make is the biggest movie ever. So how dare anyone not embrace what this guy is doing? Like, you have to give this guy the benefit of the doubt.
Go from Terminator to now and tell me what his batting average is, and then shut up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's insane. So, it's insane.
And again, like, he spent all that time like going up to the moon and like going to the bottom of the ocean. So like everybody like kind of lost track of him. He didn't make a million movies the way that other people did, but his contributions are seismic. And we'll talk about more about that in a minute. But John Woo for me like is a definitive 90s voice in action movies. And I think that too, I think that for people probably our age, he was an entry point into something more exotic and more violent and more, intense than I think that, like you'd probably been watching 80s action movies, Hollywood action movies. I'm not saying you, but like a lot of people were.
No, you'd be right if you said that. I came to John Woo through American cinema, through his American, like I went backwards.
You went backwards.
I saw like Death Warrant or is it Death Warrant? Oh, no, sorry, Hard Target. Wow. Hard Target, and then I saw Face Off, and then I went back. I mean, this was the 90s, so it's been plenty of time. But then I saw Hard Boiled, and I was like, oh.
Yep.
So I went backwards, yeah.
I saw Hard Boiled. Hard Boiled was one of the first like ultra-violent action movies I'd ever seen. Completely blew my mind. I saw it right when it hit videotape. So it was like right around, I saw Hard Target and Hard Boiled probably one on top of the other. I mean, I think that, was it Hard Target was like 93, I think, or 94, 93.
Did you I don't know if this is.
Yeah, that's right. That was 93. That was my mom taking me to the theater, buying tickets for me and my friend Aaron, and then leaving, and then coming back and picking us up.
Nothing better, right?
Nothing better than that.
Nothing better.
But yeah, so I saw those kind of like right on top of another and was completely obsessed with John Woo, and then found, of course, The Killer, which was in 89, but still has that kind of a 90s feel. But
once again, I had no like outlet for this. No one was teaching me this stuff. My parents didn't know cinema. So the reason I watched The Killer was because of Jackie Brown. Just because Sam Jackson mentions it, and I was like, well, what's that? And then I was finding this all by myself in reverse, yeah.
The Killer was one that I watched. Like I saw that after Hard Boiled and Hard Target. My dad was a big and still was a big movie guy. We saw movies a lot when in high school, growing up and stuff. So there was a lot of influence there, and he was not steeped in violent action movies by any stretch. I probably found more of those than he was ever probably like interested in seeing, but I ended up showing him. So I remember when I showed him Hard Boiled, he was completely taken back. He was just like, oh my God, like, I can't believe you're watching this and that I'm watching this and that this is made. But like when you think about 90s action, and you think about trademark visual stamps and guys that were like, true visual auteurs, John Woo, with the dubs and the slow-mo and the opera and how everything is a dance and it was so beautifully choreographed. He to me is like a vintage 90s director.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like, and it's one of, and so much so that, we could talk about Mission Impossible 2, and it's like, there's things about it that work, things that don't, I think.
It's really a weird point in that franchise.
Yeah.
When you watch the whole thing together, it does not sit with the others. That doesn't mean I don't like it.
Exactly. And that was the part of the whole point is every one of those movies in that franchise gets its own distinct flavor by the director.
Right.
Until late with McQuarrie sort of everything one. But when you look at Woo's filmography, he was so 80s and 90s and 2000s just didn't know what to do with him. Like the projects were just bizarre and not really like
was like
his caliber and
Paycheck. Was that?
Yeah, like that. Well, it was 2003. He did Wind Talkers with Nick Cage, which has some honestly like that movie has a pretty bad, simplistic, hammy script. But the action. Have you ever seen Wind Talkers?
Yes, I was actually managing a video store when Wind Talkers was released.
That movie has action that is fucking unrelenting.
Yes, it's crazy.
Like you had films like Wind Talkers and Mel Gibson's We Were Soldiers. They came out, and Black Hawk Down. Those two movies came out like one on top of another. Black Hawk Down 2001, Wind Talkers 2002, and 2003. We Were Soldiers, and those movies just like steeped.
That's a good triple feature right there.
Yeah, and like they steeped you in battlefield shit. The stuff in Wind Talkers is grisly stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's intense.
If anything, I would say that the reason it didn't do better or gain more of an audience is the title and the advertising.
Yeah,
and even advertising and the art for it was really bad too. It was just all very badly handled.
And honestly, like I mean, I have to go back and watch the movie. I remember the script being really on the nose and hammy and like melodramatic and like overdone. But that's part of John Woo's style.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Watch Face Off. Face Off is that too. I love it.
So we're just gonna get so Face Off to me is, like one of the great Hollywood action films of all time.
Yeah.
I think it's when it was basically when Woo had taken all he learned in Hong Kong cinema, applied it to a $70 million Hollywood budget
with superstars, right?
With superstars. Yeah. He got screwed around with, of course, on Hard Target by Universal. He had a better experience, I guess, to a certain extent, making Broken Arrow. But
which is odd because Broken Arrow, it feels like the lesser of those.
Oh yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's can't fun, be sort of ridiculous, but but when you get to Face Off, you're basically operating in that two guns blazing fashion that he made so popular. And I think that, just no one really could do quite like him. I just don't think there's anybody.
And it's survived too. It has a voice
totally.
Still to this
You go back and watch Face Off now, and there's stunts in that movie and shootouts that are just still amazing. And
I think kids discovering Nick Cage now find that movie, and then they're like, oh, it opens up a whole world to them. Like who made this?
Exactly. And then you sort of can't comment, and then you have, Cage, the run of The Rock, Face Off, and Con Air in the 90s. I mean, that triple feature of action movies is sort of just like, it's like unimpeachable, really.
One of those is actually on my list. So it's hard not to put all of them on the list, isn't it?
Yeah. So Woo was one of those guys. One of my other guys, I think that really exemplified 90s and definitely had two of the biggest hits of the 80s with Predator and Die Hard. Was John McTiernan. And,
absolutely.
It's such a shame, of course, what happened to him with like the legal stuff,
the tax stuff.
And it's just like there were so few action directors who were as muscular and as just so. I mean, arguably, forceful.
He arguably the greatest action director of all time. Arguably, right?
I mean, without a doubt.
Yeah, no one does geography like McTiernan.
Correct.
There's no one that's less confusing with space.
Correct.
And that is one of the most important things when it comes to action.
Correct. Absolutely. You're right. 100% on that. And when you talk about something like that, I mean, like Die Hard with a Vengeance, man, like I will point to that movie as and really quick. I mean, I'll just rattle them off. So I'm looking at them.
Go for it. One of his movies is on my list too, by the way.
Got Nomads in 86, Predator in 87, Die Hard in 88, The Hunt for the Red October in 1990. So you start the 90s off with The Hunt for Red October. Medicine Man, okay, fine. The Last Action Hero. Sue me, I love it. I don't care what people say.
Nick, it's one of my 3.
Okay.
I'm not even playing here.
So I'll let you dive into that in a minute. Die Hard with a Vengeance, my personal favorite Die Hard movie. I am not saying that it is better than Die Hard 1. Die Hard 1 is what it is.
Nick, we are right here, man. I have said this sentence before. What you just said, I've said to people before, literally.
My father picked me up from school. I remember high school. I remember not going to the last period. I left school early. We said we had a dentist appointment. We went to the first show of Die Hard with a Vengeance. I remember that was a big day.
I feel like for me, it was, like a lot of people discovered Sam Jackson through Pulp Fiction, which is great. No one's saying that. It's not. Yeah. But for me, Sam Jackson was for decades. He was the guy from Die Hard. Yeah. And I always looked at that as his genesis.
It was a 1-2 punch for me. My parents, I saw Pulp Fiction in the theater with my parents in 94, and then 95. My dad and I saw Die Hard with a Vengeance. So Sam Jackson was of course I remembered him from Jurassic Park.
Absolutely too.
So I remember when he was in Pulp Fiction. For me, I was like, oh my God, that's the guy from Jurassic Park. That's the computer guy. But in any event,
it's the crook from Coming to America.
Yeah, exactly. But Die Hard with a Vengeance, the spatial awareness in that film, and like that movie is 95% handheld camera. And the Peter Menzies Jr. who shot that movie, incredible cinematographer. The cinematography in Die Hard with a Vengeance is it's out of control.
It's beautiful.
I have watched it so many times. I probably watched it more times than the people who made it. And
also one of the first times a script was ever kind of reworked like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
notable.
Legend has it that script was worked on all throughout production. I can't tell. I mean, No,
I'm not saying it takes away from it. No,
totally. But yeah, that was
called Simon Says by Jonathan Heinsley, I believe. Yeah. Right. And then they just.
Well, I interviewed William Wisher. I remember he talked about it a little bit.
Oh, really? Okay.
If you ever heard that podcast, that was a fun one.
I'm going to listen to it now.
But yeah, that was one thing that started as one thing, got turned into another.
Brilliantly.
But I think that movie's just so hardcore. It never stops. It's unrelenting. And then the 13th Warrior, which, I've always loved, thought it was super cool, amazing atmosphere. Of course,
it's not his movie, right?
You can't really call it his final vision because of all the reshoots and the edits and Michael Crichton and everything else. And I
actually have a 13th Warrior poster hanging in my home.
Yeah.
Like I'm that big
of
a
man.
Fan. Yeah, I mean, like
you're the man.
And I think when you watch that movie, that cut does say something's wrong here. But totally. I still love it.
The Thomas Crown Affair. I mean, and he had that in both. And the Thomas Crown Affair. I mean, my wife is like ready to like never see that movie ever again. It doesn't matter what time of day that movie is on, what point at which in the narrative it is on. If that movie is on and I am home, I am watching John McTiernan's Thomas Crown Affair. That movie is so photogenic and cool and sexy and fun, and Rene Russo off the charts, and Pierce Brosnan, just like who doesn't want to be him in that movie? It's just it's such a great adult movie that you just know that like, imagine going into an office today in Hollywood and like being like, let's make a $70 million Thomas Crown Affair movie. Like it wouldn't happen. Like it wouldn't get made. And it's such a shame.
Going down that route, a lot of the stuff we've mentioned so far would no longer get made.
No, totally.
It just wouldn't. You couldn't. A lot of this is original fare too. So it's not going to
happen. Another one of my guys. And then, I just like, I can't help but feel that.
Oh, also wait, before you go, I was going to say Thomas Crown Affair. I think it was also like this promise of where things could have went.
Yeah.
Like I always see that movie and I'm like, if McTiernan didn't fall like he did, the great things we could have had.
Yeah, Rollerball and Basic are like, it is not like...
I don't hate Basic. I don't hate
Basic the way that other people do. I don't think it's terrible. It looks great.
Rollerball is insane. It's literally insane.
it's like another person made it. I know that there were all sorts of issues on that production too.
Yeah.
But it's such like an indignant end to an amazing career. Like I can't believe that those are the two movies that, you know, he ended on and hasn't been able and like it just seems so odd too. Like so many people in Hollywood get another chance. Like
why not him?
Like right, like
Wesley Snipes is back. And he had the tax stuff, right?
In Hollywood, like, what John McTiernan did all that bad? Like, maybe I don't know. Like, maybe I just don't realize or something. Maybe I got to go read like I
said, it's no worse than Wesley Snipes' tax evasion.
Like, what the hell? Like, like, he's one of the greatest action directors. But
give him like a Nick Fury movie. He's worked with Sam Jackson.
Crush something like that. But
Marvel, just pay for it. Give him a Nick Fury movie. Do it.
Exactly. But I don't think that you can really talk about 90s action movies without talking about Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. And,
absolutely.
And the 80s, you know, if the 80s were a combination of like Joel Silver and Simpson Bruckheimer aesthetic, you know, sort of bouncing back and forth between Silver never maintained. You know, he still had some hits, you know, big ones, of course, but he never maintained that level of consistent quality, I think, that Bruckheimer did. And like, you know,
you mean through the 90s?
Yeah, I mean, through the 90s. And really, when you look at the movies like Days of Thunder, Bad Boys, Crimson Tide, The Rock, Con Air, Armageddon, Enemy of the State, Coyote Ugly, and you peak at Gone in 60 Seconds in 2000. That's an insane run of
hits,
of meat and potato action movie hits for the general populace.
I love that Coyote Ugly is in there.
Yeah.
What a crazy little entry.
Full disclosure, I was working at Bruckheimer Films during Coyote Ugly, Gone in 60, Remember the Titans, Black Hawk Down, Pearl Harbor, Bad Company, Bad Boys 2, Kangaroo Jack, Pirates of the Caribbean, Veronica Guerin, King Arthur, and National Treasure.
What were you doing for them?
Everything from picking up Jerry's lunch to making, you know, 50 copies of scripts to, you know, picking up people's ice cream cones and driving around town with dry cleaning and you know.
Nick, I didn't know that you did this. You actually knew Jerry Bruckheimer.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. We even had this. We had the same sneakers at one point. I remember. I drove my Honda Civic out onto the tarmac of the Burbank Airport and was loading his private jet up with food from a restaurant from Brentwood. And I remember him getting out of his car and walking up, and I was unloading my car, and I hear this voice. He goes, "Hey, nice sneakers." And like we both had the same sneakers, so it was pretty funny. But yeah, no, Jerry was really, really, really cool.
That's great to know that he was a cool guy. Yeah. The Tony Scott Bruckheimer thing was like, you know, and still is. I love all that stuff. Absolutely,
you know, they're my idols, and so I had a chance.
Scott is one of my favorite ever.
Yeah, I had a chance to work for at Bruckheimer Films, and then they got me a job over at Tony Scott, so I worked for him for 6 months, and
like with him, like.
Oh yeah. I worked with Tony as one of like the office, you know, bitches, you know, go get stuff and, you know, get him his lunch from, you know, pavilions and everything. When he was doing, he had just shot Spy Game. So I remember actually all the gear coming back from the Spy Game shoot, all of his personal effects. And I was like tasked with taking it all out. And like, I opened up this big thing of luggage, and like there's like 5 of those famous vests that he would wear, and I was like, oh my god, like I'm like actually looking at all the vests. This is crazy.
Did you like touch one of them and feel the power of it?
Yeah. Yeah, we touched it all. it was hilarious. He had, you know, he did have multiple pink hats, so that is all true. I saw the stash of hats, but it was when he had just shot Spy Game. He was just coming back from Spy Game, and they were prepping both Man on Fire and Domino. Both Man on Fire and Domino were being written at the same time. So you had Brian Helgeland coming in and Richard Kelly coming in.
Yeah.
And he was doing meetings with both of them, and he was editing Spy Game with Christian Wagner at his, you know, little production company there in West Hollywood.
He was really working those years too.
Oh yeah,
Like
he
he
never
pumping them
stopped.
out. Yeah.
He was he was reading everything, and that was around the time they remember he was approached to do a Bond movie, but he balked at it because they wouldn't let him do it rated R and let him make a Tony Scott movie, and
We'll always be sad we didn't get to see his version of the Warriors.
Yeah,
whatever that would have been.
Yeah, that and obviously we'll never see his Top Gun 2,
right? Yeah,
which is a bummer. But for me, the trio of Bruckheimer, Tony Scott, and Michael Bay, I think that those three names sort of exemplified the '90s and sort of gave people the slickest, the most exciting, like the most visceral rides in terms of popcorn, movies consistently. And of course, Bay gets all the hate in the world, and I've always loved his work. I think he's an insane visual madman.
If you listen to this podcast or any of my podcasts, you'll know. For anyone that does, I've always been a defender. I'm a big fan of his. He's an auteur, and anyone who says he's not is wrong.
And he's not infallible. He's capable of making very poor mistakes as a filmmaker and director. I'm the first to admit.
He can also be an asshole. Let's be honest. Yeah, he has his moments. Like we all do.
And again, I led a very charmed Hollywood existence. I dealt with Bay multiple times. He was nothing but cool and fun to me. I never saw an asshole. He held the door for me when like my hands were full. And I remember one day I was very early in the morning getting off the 10, and I got off the highway and he was right in his Porsche and I was in my Civic, and he's like, "I'll race to the office, Nick." And he peeled off, so I never had a
bad experience. No,
I didn't mind going to his offices. The dog was a little scary. But I never saw a crazy person. I was also not on set. So it was all office work.
You never saw the general.
No. Yeah. I never saw the general on the battlefield. But I think
it takes a certain type of man to get those movies in budget on time.
Yeah, there's nobody like Michael Bay. There never probably will be somebody quite like him. I even think that people who don't care about action movies, I think that even those people would look at a Michael Bay movie abstractly and just be like, what the fuck's this? Holy shit. Oh my God. Simply because I just think that he sees vision. I think he sees action in a way that so few people really ever have. And admittedly, self-admittedly, he was very much influenced by Tony Scott and always fashioned himself as the next Tony Scott and wanted to be the next Tony Scott. And,
I'd argue that he is. I mean, without being any insulting to Tony Scott, if there was a lineage there,
absolutely,
it does make sense. I mean, there are people that say Michael Bay's movie, I think the generation that was raised on Transformers, have a tendency to not appreciate the non-Transformers Michael Bay.
Correct.
Which it does annoy me because there was something happened to Michael Bay with The Island. I think The Island was not appreciated as much as he wanted it to be.
It's the only time that he bombed. Michael Bay doesn't bomb.
Michael Bay doesn't, right.
Michael Bay doesn't bomb. So when that movie bombed, he was like, "Fuck this," and listen,
I mean, the theory is, and I'm not saying it's my theory, but that the Transformers franchise, and it's a big one, is a kind of a troll. Because a lot of it, I've watched all those. I've seen every Transformers movie.
I've seen them all.
I couldn't tell you what happens in every one, really. But I'm like, how does a man that makes something as well made as The Rock, or even Bad Boys, and then you watch this, you're like, how did it get more confusing and make less sense? And the performances are somehow not as sharp.
Yeah, no,
it's like he feels different about this stuff. But then
Age of Extinction and The Last Night are they are not even
movies.
They are abstract. They are.
It's almost like art. It's not even.
Yeah, and I'm about to say, honestly, I'm not trying to be pretentious or or something. You can't, a dumb person cannot make those movies.
You're right. I agree. I agree.
And even if they're coming off as ultimate ADD experiences, and sort of just random association, it's just there's something to be said about getting all that done and making it look the way that he does all the time.
It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous looking.
And to say nothing of the thing that he did for Netflix last year, which is like, I still can't believe some of the action in Six Underground.
I still wish I saw that in theaters.
Yeah, like
it's insane. It doesn't. The script is. I don't even know what to say about it. But
was written in crayons. That script makes no minute to minute. That movie makes so little sense, and yet you're still watching it because it's so good looking, and the shit that's going on is so crazy. And then, oh my god, and the boat is a magnet, and you're like, oh my god.
But then you put Pain and Gain in there, and Pain and Gain to me is incredible. Like,
great film.
I saw that six times in theaters. I was like,
and that was the one that he wanted to make forever. That it took 3 Transformers movies to make, to get Paramount to give him $30 million to go make that film. Listen, if people don't think that he's a good filmmaker, I point to Pain and Gain. Quite frankly, I point to 13 Hours.
Yeah.
That movie is underrated as all get out. It's close to Black Hawk Down in terms of the intensity and the unrelenting battlefield shit.
That's kind of what I was saying. If there was a lineage, was Tony Scott.
Yep.
It's 13 Hours, right? I mean,
that was basically his Tony Scott movie. Like, that was as if Tony had made a full-fledged battle film, which, Tony never really did. He never got a chance to make a war movie. And
it's not like he couldn't, though. He'd be great at it.
Oh, he would have knocked it out of the park. But I kind of think that's where you would have been in that realm as a 13 Hours. But
I'd even point to The Rock, man. I think The Rock is a well-made movie. I don't care about
The Rock is great.
Yeah, like people say, like,
a couple nights ago,
Michael Bay is so extreme and he does all this crazy stuff. I'm like, yeah, but watch The Rock. The performances are excellent. The script is tight. The action is edited like madness, but it was a new style. It wasn't
correct.
It wasn't a mistake.
You have to remember too, The Rock was the second movie he made.
Right?
And
yeah,
he needed like Bad Boys was a sizable hit. It wasn't a gargantuan hit, but it was a buzzy enough hit for him to get Bruckheimer to give him the job on The Rock. But he knew that he needed the second movie. You got Connery, Cage, and Ed Harris, right? So and
atom bombs, all
and you're going to come out in the summer. And you've got to get that movie done, and it's got to be great, and it can't be like too much. And you still that movie got pretty good reviews back in the day when it came out. It wasn't killed. Like, critics didn't destroy it. I remember
in college, I was taught that was the opening chase scene was the worst chase scene in movie history, and I was like, even then, I was like, why is this bad? Because it's not like Bullet.
Exactly,
Bullet's great. No one's saying Bullet isn't great.
I went to film school, and I was the one who put the Jerry Bruckheimer Films logo in front of his student film, and then had everybody in the class go, "What's this asshole doing? Like, why are you doing that? Like he's not anything good." And I was like, "Well, yeah, he is. They make great movies."
Right.
But I don't think that you can sort of look at '90s movies without sort of talking about the Bruckheimer Bay Scott, effect to everything.
I think Bruckheimer's name itself is literally the 90s. If I had to put one name as a stamp, you know what I mean? Like, even when Matt and Trey were making I say that like I know them, when they were making Team America, Bruckheimer was that is a parody of Bruckheimer.
The 90-minute Bruckheimer parody, and they knew it.
Yeah. Like, because he was the king.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I didn't know. I can't believe you worked with all these guys, Nick. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You've touched the stars, man.
Yeah. Well, it was my first experiences in LA were the dream come true experiences. I did not get a chance to sort of work up I didn't work up the rung, but it was definitely wild. I will say.
Not to veer off, but was there a goal there? Were you trying to be a maker at some point? Or you just wanted to be next to it?
Movie. I thought that I wanted to produce movies like Bruckheimer, but then I saw what that meant, and in terms of your life, and I was not, like in high school, I thought I was going to be the next Jerry Bruckheimer. I wanted to be the next Jerry Bruckheimer. And then I saw what it would take to be the next Jerry Bruckheimer. And I was like, yeah, now I know why there's one Jerry Bruckheimer. making movies on that level, you have to be willing to sacrifice your life, your whole life.
You decided to be happy instead.
Yeah. And like, I was not interested in sacrificing my whole life just to make movies. I like watching movies more than I want to see how the sausage gets made.
Right.
So I had wonderful experiences in LA, worked for some great people. Again, I had a charmed existence, over this last few years when all these Scott Rudin things have come out and these missives on all these psychopathic Hollywood people. I look back and I just thank my lucky stars. I'm like, wow, like I worked for huge people in LA and nobody treated me like a piece of shit. And I never had staplers thrown at me. And I never had somebody, trying to finger me in the bathroom or whatever the fuck is going on, in everybody's office these days. So I got lucky, definitely got lucky. So I can't speak bad about any of my experience. Listen, I got to work the front desk of Jerry Bruckheimer Films when Bad Boys 2 was shutting down the Miami highway, the Miami Causeway. And I had people calling Santa Monica office while they were shooting to complain. And I'm sitting there on the phone, be like, yeah, sorry, I don't know. They're blowing up the highway. I don't know. And just hang up the phone, So
Nick, that's incredible, man.
That for me.
Do you understand how many times I've seen Bad Boys 2? You're telling me this?
Bad Boys 2 is, I remember when they would be sending in the dailies for, when they would be sending in the DVDs and seeing the footage, because they were doing Bad Boys 2 and they were doing Pirates. At the same time. Bad Boys 2, Kangaroo Jack, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Veronica Guerin all came out in 2003. All of those movies came out in 2003 from Bruckheimer as a producer.
That's crazy.
So he was flying from I remember at one point he was flying from Prague to Australia to Miami because they were doing Bad Company.
Right.
And that was being done in Europe.
That was Hopkins and Chris Rock.
Yeah, that's one of the other Bruckheimer. That's one of the few Bruckheimer bombs.
Mm-hmm.
That was the how the hell do we sell a terrorist thriller where there's a nuclear bomb in New York City a year after 9/11. Try that one out. And I still say that Bad Company isn't the worst movie.
No, it's okay, but it's not.
It was okay. It should have been rated R. Even Joel Schumacher told me, I heard him say it, in front of many people, this movie should have been rated R.
I always feel like Chris Rock is misplaced in a lot of movies, depending on tone.
There is no such thing as PG-13 Chris Rock. I mean,
he just doesn't fit there as well.
No,
he feels muzzled.
But a pretty unimpeachable run for Bruckheimer. Yeah. It's insane, the level of consistency and box office. And, again, you can make a case for each film, and some have been better than others, certainly. But pretty much untouchable in the 90s as far as I'm concerned. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it for 90s.
I mean, I feel like you've already covered everything I've already written down pretty much, Nick. So
we're simpatico.
We're roughly the same age, so we were like coming of. I mean, you were literally working there. I don't know what I was doing. I was just a guy in Baltimore watching these things on VHS, or going to the theater. But I was by no. Listen, I do not want to give the impression that I was like anything. I was literally. You were getting coffee.
Getting coffees and making scripts and making sure that every page was in there and doing grocery runs and
let me say this,
taking people's dog to the vet, that kind of stuff.
If you take cons like conventions out of the picture, just the fact meeting people that big and that influential in your life outside of something as paying for it, you were working with them, even though it was just getting coffee or getting laundry.
Oh yeah, no.
So
yeah, I remember
you met them.
I remember when I got my first paycheck, and it had the Bruckheimer Films logo on it and the Disney logo on it, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
I'm
man.
all right with that. If this is the highest that I ever get, I'm okay with that.
Dude, you just told me half an hour ago Michael Bay challenged you to a car race. I mean, come on, man.
It wasn't much of a race, but that did happen. It was very funny. I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was very funny. I remember it was one of those it was one of those morning. It was like, if you've ever been up at 7:00 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning in Santa Monica, like when it's like all like, it looked like Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Right.
Like the sun was like perfect,
I'm literally looking right here at Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Exactly.
Signed by Wild Bill himself.
Yeah. And that's the movie. I think that's the movie when Michael Bay closes his eyes before he goes to bed. That's what he sees.
That's what he sees.
Yeah. I think he just sees Beverly Hills Cop 2 all night. So.
It's the best of that trilogy, if you ask me. I know that might be blasphemy, but I know Tony Scott didn't even agree with me there. He didn't. I know I've read him talk about it, and he doesn't feel that that's true.
The aesthetic sheen of that movie is, it's often imitated and never equaled.
It's because you watch Beverly Hills Cop 2 and you're like, did this need to look this good? No. Mm-hmm. It probably, to make money back then, it did not.
No.
But why do I watch it now? Was number one, I do think it's hilarious. I do think it's fun. I think it's some of Eddie's best work.
And again, like sequels to masterpieces. I mean, like,
what do you want?
What do you want? Exactly.
Did Bad Boys 2 have to go that hard? No.
But he's an animal, so
yeah, right.
You had to.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say my three, you've mentioned all three without me even saying anything. I've literally I thought about this. This wasn't me just slopping stuff down. I really had to sit down and think about it. One was James Cameron, because I was like, when I think of the 90s, I think of T2 and True Lies. Like straight up. Like they sit at the top there for me.
And then Titanic.
And Titanic, yeah.
Right,
Titanic.
But
I don't know, Nick, if I ever told you this. This is a thing that a lot of people know, is I've never seen Titanic. Ever. I've never seen it. I didn't watch it in high school because I thought it was some kind of like pretty boy movie. And then for some reason the years went by and I didn't see it. And then it just became a joke with me and some of my friends where Bob has never seen Titanic. And so now I don't want to watch it so the joke can keep up.
Wow. Titanic. That was the first date with my wife.
Are you serious? Okay, well, maybe that's why I'm not married. I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, Titanic. Wow, I saw that 5 times in the theater. Twice in 3 days.
I saw Godzilla instead, I think.
Saw Godzilla instead. Gotcha. But yeah,
no hate on Titanic.
Of course.
It's just a funny thing that I kept going for no reason, because it's funny that a guy like me hasn't watched Titanic.
Well, at this point, if you haven't seen it, I would suggest just don't see it, because
I get all the jokes.
Then you could be the one person who's not seen it, and then be able to be like, I'm the guy who hasn't seen Titanic, and still run with that. And
that's my place in history. I'm the guy who hasn't seen Titanic. I'm the movie guy who hasn't seen Titanic. How's that? But regardless, even without Titanic, I can't not put his name down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like James Cameron, and it's weird because, like you said, it's not like he didn't kind of reign in the 80s too.
Yeah. It's just he doesn't have
constraints like that.
Yeah, and he doesn't have 15 movies he doesn't have 20 movies. He doesn't have a movie every 2 years. So it's weird. You overlook. It's odd. You overlook the guy who has the 2 biggest movies of all time. It's strange.
He's kind of he's like the Tarantino of action. It's sort of, because know what I mean? Like people think like Tarantino, he does way too much, but like, no, he really doesn't make that much. Neither does James Cameron. Like, it's not about volume. He's not Ridley Scott. Like Ridley Scott, he does have a kind of a spaghetti thing about him. Like he throws it at the wall, and some of them, when they stick, when they stick, we bow before them. But sometimes they don't really stick, Robin Hood, what was it, Gods and Monsters? No, Gods and whatever. Exodus.
Ill-judged.
Right. Yeah. So even with the small filmography, it's hard not to put Cameron down for me. I didn't put Bruckheimer down just because when I think of him, I think producer. And I was going just directors.
Yep, so. That's why I cheated.
That's fine with me. Obviously, I couldn't. You're sitting in a chair in front of something right now that says The Last Boy Scout.
Oh yeah, that's a chairback.
It's a chairback. Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I had to put down Tony Scott because, like you said, with that Beverly Hills Cop, his style to me feels like the 90s. No one,
and that was Tony making love with Joel Silver instead of Jerry, cheating on Jerry.
And I mean, like, to me, whenever I see a movie that has atmosphere in a room, like when I say atmosphere, I mean like atmospheric particles in a room filling up the frame.
Yes.
I'm like, if this person doesn't credit Tony Scott with inspiration, I'm mad. Because that's what he feels like. It feels like the 90s to me. And my favorites of Tony Scott would be exactly What's Behind Your Chair, Beverly Hills Cop 2. I mean, you listed all you beat me to this, so I'm not saying anything new here. I apologize. I probably should have went deep, dug a little weirder, I guess. And then of course, I wrote Michael Bay. Because to me, he is the 90s. And I'll say it, Armageddon. Like, people make fun of it. They can make fun of it all they want. But when I think back to disaster movies, definitive, I know a lot of people would probably point to, Independence Day or something?
Yeah.
For me, it's Armageddon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to say it's some kind of art
Everybody's
film.
watched Armageddon 5 times. I don't care who
Even if they hate it. Even if they hate it.
Watched Armageddon 5 times. Everybody knows they watched it 5 times. And yeah, no, totally. Armageddon rode that wave of disaster movies and was like the Mac Daddy of them. And, it was.
How do you watch Armageddon and not see the style and not see the voice? Correct. I don't understand. I just don't understand.
Even Bay admits, now in retrospect, like, I was overkill and like I went too hard on the editing. And
but I'm like, no, man, that's what I.
Yeah. And
that's what the voice is.
And I should point you to a podcast I did a while back. I interviewed Mark Goldblatt. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know the name, if you look him up, you'll be like, holy shit, look at those credits. Mark Goldblatt, we can sort of end on this note here because I know that you're probably your time, but Mark Goldblatt edited the following movies. And he talked about how what he did with Armageddon was, trend setting. And, Mark Goldblatt edited The Terminator, Rambo First Blood Part 2, Commando, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Woo! Predator 2, Terminator 2, The Last Boy Scout, Super Mario Brothers, True Lies, Showgirls, Starship Troopers, Armageddon, Detroit Rock City, Hollow Man, Pearl Harbor, Bad Company, Bad Boys 2, X-Men The Last Stand, The Wolfman, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Chappie, and Death Wish.
So, okay, first observation, not only has he edited some extremely just masterpieces, but he's probably done his best to save a few.
Correct.
To save a few from the tank. Yeah.
That's one I'll send you when we offline here. You should.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I loved listening.
Mark is amazing, a fountain of knowledge, and is very candid in our discussions about working with Bay and what that was like, and Cameron and stuff. So and Tony Scott. So I'll point those in your direction. You'll love those.
Absolutely. I mean, I appreciate it, man. Like I look forward to. I'm just glad I got to hear some stories about you working with these people. This is something I didn't expect. Because Nick, what I know about you is your Facebook presence. I believe you've written for Variety, right?
I've been writing them not as much during COVID. Just a lot of the freelancers, sort of haven't gotten as much work. But yeah, for about 5 years, been writing for Variety, and loved it. Great stuff. Good people, and putting me on the phone with
legends, right?
Legends. So I could just totally insane.
Yeah, I know. I did. This is stuff. The stuff, the 90s stuff I didn't know. I'm kind of glowing because I didn't know I was asking the guy who kind of sat next to it all and got their coffee. I didn't know that.
Was getting peanut butter milkshakes for executives who didn't want to get in their car. So
right, man, that's amazing. Well, okay, so would you like anybody listening? Would you like to point them somewhere? Plug anything?
I don't know.
Your podcast, right?
Well, I used to do a podcast, Podcasting Them Softly. They still do stuff. I just haven't had time to do it as much in recent years, but it's still up and running. Podcasting Them Softly has tons of stuff. I write for We Are Cult, which is a really fun site. Great guy runs that site. I've done a lot of fun interviews there, done some reviews there. It's really just me on Facebook, and do you duplicate those posts anywhere else, or is it literally just your Facebook feed? No, it's just my Facebook page. Some of them get duplicated for We Are Cult. Then I do some sort of original content for them. And then I'm write for Variety professionally. I've gotten into independent film, producing. I do a lot of script consultant work. That's really my main job is doing, short, small gigs, big gigs, medium gigs. Just doing a lot of script reading, a lot of consulting work.
Well, Nick, I got to say, it's so nice to put a voice, because I've heard your podcasting, but I haven't really interacted with you ever like
No, it's
like
been
this.
really
So
fun.
yeah, no, it's just like after I feel like it has to be what, 5 years of just
I think
of
so,
you
man.
laughing at me
I know
arguing with my friend.
You've been around for a long time on the movie, threads and stuff. You and Matt. So I was more than happy to finally get a chance to talk for real and get outside just the digital morass that we all live in all day.
Right. Well, I want to say, if you ever have something you want to discuss, like another movie topic or anything, you're always
we'll
welcome.
do this again. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would love to do that. We can do something that isn't 90s action where we're both so simpatico. It's like,
yeah, we'll talk about like our favorite, Japanese dance movies from the 40s or something, and
right.
blow people's minds.
Or just pick an actor like Oliver Reed and we'll just talk about all his movies or something.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. But seriously, thank you again, Nick, and this was great.
Cool, man. Thank you.
Thanks.